Let's start with an overview. What is PetCircle? What's the story? How did it all start?
Yeah, PetCircle is 10 or 11 years old at early 22, and is a pet-oriented Australian e-com business that we are branching out into other areas as it stands. So we're one of the largest pet businesses in the country now, and send dog food or cat litter or meds or toys to people around the country.
So why do you need data in the first place?
Yeah.
How do you sell it? How does the business work? What are the core relationships that make up a business?
So it's been a journey, right? And we've gone through different phases, as you've said. But what's become really apparent over the years is that we're as a specialist player, right? So we're not a marketplace, we're not a grocery store, we're not an Amazon or a Woolworths or anything like that. We are pet-oriented business. Pets are an incredibly personal aspect of people's lives, right? There's a whole trend called the humanization of pets. Pets are part of the family. I know my cavoodle, she might be the lowest rung in many ways, as she recognizes every dinner when she's begging for scraps, but she's part of the family, right? We just went on a holiday. It was mandatory that we could take her with us. So we need to provide a personal service, but how do you do that at scale, right? Like it's one thing if you're in a bricks and mortar store and you get to know your customers, you get to know their pets, but we're trying to do this digitally. We're trying to do this at mass scale. So data is the way to achieve that, to personalize the experience, to understand in some ways with our vast reservoir of data to help pet parents be better pet parents, to pet better, as we like to say. But we should know more about what a cavoodle eats and plays with than a parent of a pet. And we should help people be better parents that way.
Yeah. And so for the end user, what does data mean, and what does that data mean for the business? Like, do you use it to be more efficient in your processes? Is it important from a risk mitigation perspective, or simply to make the business more scalable, or is it all of the three?
Yeah, it runs the gamut, right? So, and we talked about phases. Historically, like in the early stages, it was primarily about analytics, helping us as managers understand what's going on in the business. Then we moved into probably using it to drive operations more efficiently. And I still feel really passionate about that aspect of it. But ordering products from our suppliers better. And now we're sort of going into that next phase where it's about operationalizing to our customers. So, the classic example of course, is making better recommendations to, on site and via email recommendations. But we want to do a lot more than that in the future.
There's one thing that we seem to keep finding in the industry, talking to different people, and is this divide or this gap between how data is perceived from the perspective of, say, an engineer or a data scientist or an analyst, and how data is perceived by the business. Yeah. And you almost seem to have developed the skills across the board, because you had, that it was an imperative for the business. So I suppose the business came first and then the technical, or was it the other way around? Tell me about the story. How did you develop your skills in data, through data, for the business? I
mean, personally, I had the advantage of, like, my undergraduate degree was in engineering, computer science back then. My postgraduate was in mathematics. And then, of course, I started a business. So I actually had all these three sort of perspectives forced upon me. Right. And I do take that into our day-to-day now within the data team. And I would say I see them as three different perspectives, not just two different perspectives. Very much engineering and analytics and data science are complementary, and they actually approach things in different ways. The comment I often make is that engineering is typically rules-oriented, whereas analytics and data science is typically goals-oriented. And it can seem similar, and it often is very similar, and they both tend to be methodical and detail-oriented. But, They actually do have some distinct differences which come into play sometimes. And then with the business, most business people, really what they want out of data is better reporting. Insights, but also just operational reporting. Are our sales up and down? That's great. It's super important. It's probably not what gets the juices going for the data team, though.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's because we like complexity when we're working with data. You know, some people just love the sheer challenge of massaging huge data sets or trying to extract a signal in the noise. You know, it is a challenging thing, and it's easy to get enamored by the idea of become almost this wizard that can do things that other people, common mortal, cannot do. And a lot of people are, you know, I can see it on social media. There's a bunch of polls going around LinkedIn when other content creators ask, what would you like to see next? And they talking to data scientists. The top choice is deep learning.
Yeah.
And I'm here looking at them and going like, dude, like there's only 5% of companies that actually would right now, you know, where deep learning could make a tangible, sizable, significant impact on the business. Most businesses don't even have, you know, they don't even know where the data is. So let's be realistic a little and focus on that boring part of data, right? But very necessary.
Absolutely. Like it's it's becoming almost a cliche in businesses saying, I want to be more data oriented. I want to be more data driven. Let's go and hire data scientists. So they hire these expensive, smart people to come in, and then they go like, where's the data? What do I do with it? You know, you got to get your nuts and bolts in play and your fundamentals right. So we only really kicked that off in 2020, and that took a while.
The foundation.
So we obviously had databases and such, and a reporting tool over the top of it, but it was disaggregated. It sat over the top of our transactional systems, so that impedes a lot of the ability to produce nice, clean data sets and all that sort of stuff. So we really had to get the foundations of our data environment right, which involved, you know, the data lake, data warehouse, that sort of stuff going through the consolidation of data.
Tell me a few stories if you feel like disclosing them, but I'm curious to know more about the actual problems that having disconnected data can bring to the organization, you know, from meetings running longer to people not finding agreements on basic things. How does it actually feel when you're experiencing that?
It's a great question. So many things pop into my head. One of the worst things that happens with disaggregated data is that you, especially if you've got the kind of company that wants to be data oriented, which we always have been, is that you focus on what can be measured and you neglect what can't be measured. And so much can't be measured when it's not integrated. I mean, it's hard enough when it is integrated sometimes, let alone when it's disaggregated. So what I found that meant was that it tended to be a lot easier to measure negatives than positives. It tended to be a lot easier to measure costs than loyalty, right? Loyalty of a customer. So their propensity to repurchase, the propensity of them to spend more of their share of wallet across pet with us, and the sentiment they have towards us. Like, are they just buying from us because they don't know that we're the only pet company they know, or are they buying from us because they value our delivery, our customer service, our pricing, and our range, right? It's very, very hard to measure, but you can absolutely check the cost of your customer service team per contact or something like that. So it tends to lead to quite a negative approach, a cost cutting approach, rather than an expansive one, which as a growth company we want to achieve. The other major issue, and we're still struggling with this, even in an environment where we have a lot more connections between the data, is fragmentation. And I think that's really critical in data management. Because there's different sources of data, it's only natural that people try and calculate the same sorts of things, but from different sources. And, that leads to problems when you've got one department talking about customer retention using one set of numbers and metrics, and another department talking about it from a different perspective. You're just talking different languages across the table. And it's actually unhelpful. I'd rather go non-data driven.
Instead of having two different tools, right?
Yeah. So we're trying to resolve those issues.
It's an interesting. I've never thought about this. So with this clarity, particularly the difference between negative and positive, and how easy it is to measure churn, for example, and how hard it is to measure things like loyalty. They obviously require more data over longer periods of time, but also more data points, because loyalty, how do you measure, right? Like you can use different metrics, and so it almost it's a harder question to answer through data.
It's a lot more. Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I can speak specifically on this because our ERP system and our website tracking system, as well as our customer service and such, were disconnected. It was very, very hard to tell that someone maybe they weren't buying from us. In the ERP system, very, very easy to check on. But what we didn't know was that they were coming back and visiting the website every week, and the product was out of stock. So we were just ignoring it. And then products are out of stock all the time, especially at the moment, unfortunately, with supply chain issues. So that doesn't ring any alarm bells. But if the customer is someone who's bought from us 10 times, and now they can't get their product, we should be on top of that, right? We should be helping them.
Do something.
Saying, hey, we noticed you're looking for X, Y, Z, but there's this other complementary product that's really, really good. A substitute product that's really, really good. And let's help you make that transition because this isn't coming back into stock anytime soon.